Hey everybody, welcome to Truth Be Told. Thanks very much for listening in. I really appreciate you being here. Today, I just want to hold a little bit of a conversation with you. I realize it's a little bit one-sided because we're not doing like a live chat or anything like that, but feel free to comment below. I would love to engage in discussion about this with you, especially because I'm not entirely sure that this is a widespread phenomenon, what we're going to be talking about today. But it is something that I've experienced, and so it's something I'd like to address, not only to clear the air of truth be told and how I've conducted this channel, but also just to kind of get us to think a little more critically about this topic that I think does sometimes stand in the way of good communication between people that think differently on this topic. So if you've not come across this before, let me know in the comments. Speaking of which, if you're on Spotify, you can actually comment. I don't think this is an update that got widely spread or people were very much notified about, but yeah, on Spotify, you can actually send in comments about each episode. So don't think I'm just talking to the YouTube people when I say comment below. You're more than welcome to do that on the podcast form of this also. But the phenomenon that I've discovered is that I'm someone who reads a lot of books. I read very widely, all kinds of different things. People recommend things to me. I'm interested in a lot of different topics. I like to be relatively well-rounded on a variety of subjects. And throughout the course of my reading, I've read some books that are wonderful, some books that I didn't enjoy so much, some books that I just was entertained by, and some books that really added to me as a person and what I understand and my worldview. And I think this is a good thing to do. I really believe people should read widely, but also read carefully and with discernment. I never read something and it becomes an authority on a topic. I always am weighing stuff against the text of Scripture to see if it stands up as truth. And there have been several things where modern authors have written in such a way that I am impressed by what they've written because it highlights a biblical truth that I might have needed help in understanding. And sometimes that's just in conversation with other people. Sometimes that's in a book that I've read or a podcast I've listened to. And at times, especially on this channel, I will have occasion to quote other people. And I think this is a totally fine thing to do. In fact, throughout my collegiate career, we're expected to offer credit when someone else has an idea or I'm borrowing, direct phrases from certain people. I'm supposed to give credit where it's due. However, a problem arises in certain people's minds where there's a question as to how much of what I quote I am directly affirming or supporting. So, for example, let's say I read a book and I found it really interesting and there was a chapter in it that was incredible on a certain topic, and I want to quote this because I think it's valuable in helping people to understand a certain subject. But then later in the book, it asserts something that I don't believe in. Do I, as the quoter, have a responsibility to, itemize all the information I'm quoting and share which portions I do and don't affirm? I think it's a younger generation's mindset, and I don't want to paint with too broad a brush here because I'm sure this is not universally true, but I believe it's a younger person's mindset to say, no, we don't really need to, go through and split hairs on every little word or phrase or chapter or idea or subject within a quoted work that we agree with or affirm. It goes without saying that if you're quoting something, you are quoting that piece of information, not necessarily the entire body of work, or not, affirming the entire character of a certain person. And I think on one level, everybody kind of agrees with this, no matter what side of the aisle you're on in this discussion. Even if you're someone who does get a little, the hairs start to raise on the back of your neck because you're just like, yeah, that does make me a little uncomfortable when I hear someone quoting a source that I don't particularly like, or from an author who I really think is very harmful in some of his other works. I understand the concern here, and I would exercise caution for anybody who wants to quote things to say, definitely check your sources and make sure that you are not utilizing just the one quote from them that might be worthwhile, but then someone else looking into the rest of their work. If you quote somebody and they said, I hope you have a nice day. And you quote that, but every other thing they write is horrible and racist and vulgar and evil and just against God and people. Well, then maybe you do need to vet your sources a little bit more carefully. However, if you are someone who, is expecting that a person quoting something is going to, stand by every single word that an author has written or every single thing that an author has done in his or her life, I think this is also a little bit unreasonable. So we both need to come to the table and make sure we're being responsible in how we are quoting things and also in how we're receiving quotations that other people are offering up. And the reason that I think this is so important is because, for one, we all do this, and so I want us to be consistent. For example, if you go to services and your pastor quotes a commentary, we know that the pastor is simply trying to convey clarity of truth about a biblical topic based on what others in history have deemed about this section. And so they're drawing on other wisdom in order to affirm that other wise minds have considered this and seen it the same way. So they're offering it as support for a biblical truth, not in place of a biblical truth. But at no point should we listen to that pastor and say, this means that everything within the commentary is something that he agrees with. This is not true. And I think this is an example that we can all relate to. It's something we've all, as Christians, experienced before. And yet something we would say, well, of course, I'm not going to think that he supports the entire commentary. That's kind of ridiculous to think. And yet I do see this being done towards other people, maybe not pastors. Maybe we're a little, some people are more critical of pastors and some people tend to refrain from any critique of a message given by a pastor. And I think somewhere in the middle, if we can be respectful about our dialogue with a pastor, I think that's a wonderful place to be. I feel very fortunate in my own congregation to have that experience. My pastor is really, really great. I mean, he delivers great messages, but he also offers up time for discussion after the message nearly every time he speaks, and always welcomes discussion one-on-one or in smaller groups. And I really love that because I think it's respectful of him, and he's inviting us to be respectful towards him. He's not offering up a moment of, tear me down or tell me where you disagree. Nothing like that. But yeah, it's great to have discussion about where we agree and disagree. But I would never go to my pastor and say, well, you quoted this poem, and that means you ascribe to everything that poet's ever written. And look, they have a book of erotica. Like, no, I wouldn't assume that that's the motive with which the pastor is quoting a certain poem, if the poem itself is good and relevant to the discussion that he's having in the sermon. I would never go to him and say, you quoted this commentary, and that's wrong because that person who wrote the commentary turned out to be an evil man. It's like, well, sure, I might go and state that to him, but I'm never going to hold the supposition that my pastor believes in everything that the commentarian has done or said in his lifetime. This is something that we simply can't live up to. It's a type of scrutiny that I think we can't live up to, and I really don't think it's a type of scrutiny that the Bible outlines as necessary or good. We have many occasions in Scripture where outside wisdom is quoted and being used as a good thing, but that does not mean that we should take the Bible as being wholesale for every piece of media or literature that's ever been produced. This is not true at all. Paul regularly quotes pagan poets or playwrights. Even Solomon in the book of Proverbs has a lot of sections of wisdom that has been collected. Many people have this idea that Proverbs was just flat out written by Solomon, like he just sits in his room and his big brain wisdom just kind of like goes and goes as he just furiously writes at his desk. But no, there were many things that he wrote himself and many things that he collected as people visited him, and he discerned wisdom in the things that they traditionally taught. And again, this isn't to say that Solomon ascribes to all wisdom literature from every culture in the world. No, absolutely not. This is not to say that Solomon supports paganism, although later in his life he absolutely did, and that should be watched out for. But Proverbs is a good book. It's a book of the Bible that's full of wisdom that God inspired Solomon to either write or collect. In the same way, when Paul quotes certain poets, philosophers, or playwrights, we shouldn't be led to assume that he affirms every single thing that he has ever, or that these playwrights, poets, or philosophers have ever said. That's not the case. Paul is drawing out wisdom and rejecting the chaff of whatever else they've said and utilizing it to make certain points, especially in the context of preaching to Gentiles who he hopes to convert to Jesus Christ. And so we can't just say that every single thing a person quotes, every piece of wisdom that a person draws on is a wholesale affirmation of everything that author has ever said or done, because no person in the entire world is sinless. We all fall short of the glory of God. I could quote Moses, and this would be seen by many as a very good thing because Moses is in the Bible. Moses is a hero of the faith. He's a forefather that's gone before us and outlined a good way to be. But Moses also had his shortcomings in fulfilling all the things that God had for him to do. He did not live up to it perfectly. And so does that mean that I believe in all the bad things that Moses did? Absolutely not. So yes, I believe that we should all feel comfortable reading widely and discerning diligently. But I don't believe that we should be afraid to quote wisdom or truth where it's found to support the wisdom of Scripture. This isn't to say that we're looking for wisdom outside of the Bible, but it should be to say that when we're reading, attempting to become intelligent people that that have a worldview and understand the world around us and are trying to understand Scripture, but sometimes need to look things up as aids to support us in working and laboring in the Word. This is good. I really think we should be doing this. But also we should be careful about where we're drawing our information from. We don't want to be advocating for evil people or evil actions or evil work if other people are going to go and look that up. So for those of you that regularly quote things, I want to say, go ahead and do that. I don't want you to be afraid to do that, but I do want you to be conscious of the fact that there are some who will take your quotations and say that that might be an affirmation of everything the author has said or done. And as silly as you might find that accusation, you still are called to live in peace and with love towards that person that has that assumption. So when you receive this accusation, or if you do, then you need to deal lovingly with the person who is offering it up. Not, they might have assumed wrong motive in you, and you might feel hurt about that, but you need to, for the sake of peace with your brother, who you're not trying to offend, come to some sort of conclusion and reconciliation between you two. This doesn't mean compromising on what you've said or quoted. This doesn't mean ceasing to read or to understand or to draw from sources that you find credible, reliable, good, and true. This isn't to say do that at all, but it is to say that you are called to the best of your ability to live peaceably with all people. So to know that there are people with this mindset is going to be helpful for you. For those of you who do have this mindset, I don't have any harsh words towards you at all, but I would encourage you to check your motivation and make sure that you're really doing it, you're leveling this accusation with love for the person that you see offering up whatever quotations or references that you deem inappropriate or unnecessary. I think that it's okay, to come to a person and say, hey, you quoted this, but I'm not sure that that's a right thing to do, or I'm not sure that that's best practice because this author represents these standards that you don't live by, or this author has also said these things, and then leave it to that person to discern, whether they believe they're appropriate or not. Maybe they have a response that you haven't considered yourself. So in this, my main goal in this message is not to condemn anybody, whether it's those of you who are reading widely and quoting sources, or those of you who get nervous about sources being quoted because you see them as a wholesale affirmation of the author. My admonition for both parties is to say, try to treat each other as much as possible with love and understanding. Try to hear the person accusing you and say, maybe they're doing this for my benefit. Maybe they see this as for my own good. Let me hear what they have to say. And then on the other side, treat the person you're admonishing in love. Treat that person as if you really want the best for them and you want to see them do good things. And I think if we approach each other in this way, then those with concerns about the given material and those without concerns about the given material will be able to sharpen each other better. And this is what I want to see when we disagree with each other. It's totally okay to disagree. It's totally okay to have different views on what should and shouldn't be done as it relates to quoting sources. But we do need to have the humility to say, there might be a perspective that I'm not considering in this. And so when I approach a person, or when a person approaches me, assume the best motive until you're proven otherwise, and even then, act in love towards each other.